Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today I want to recommend you some books based on aesthetics, specifically books perfect for spring. This is the start of a video series that I've been wanting to do for a while, or at least I'm hoping it's going to turn into a series, because I love when people recommend books and they include something sort of visual in their recommendation, so you get a really good sense of the book, like when people make mood boards or like little videos. I think it's such a cool way of showing the book in a different way, I guess. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna recommend you some books and make a mood board for each one so that you can get a good sense of like the atmosphere of the story. Now, I'm going in purely based on vibes here and my own interpretation and my own memory of the story, which isn't always the best, but even though I can't always remember like what happens in a book or everything that happens in a book, I can always remember how it made me feel. So that's what we're sort of going with here. I think we should just get into it, and I'm going to talk about the books while I make these mood boards. I haven't really prepared that much. The only thing I've done is I've gathered up some photos for each book, and I'm going to leave a link to like the Pinterest boards that I've made if you want to know where all of the photos are from. And yeah, let's just get started. Bear with me though, because I haven't prepared much more than just finding the photos, so we'll see how this goes. I hope this whole concept makes sense to everyone. I feel like I've thought about it way too much, and now I can't really tell, but it's also not that complicated, so I feel like it'll make sense once we go along. The whole point is that you should get like a good idea of the vibes of the books. The first book we've got will be no surprise to those of you who spend a lot of time on this channel because it's one of my favorite books and it's my go-to spring recommendation. It's Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukegawa. This is a Japanese translated book set in the outskirts of Tokyo where we meet this man who is spending his days working in this tiny dorayaki shop. He had dreams of becoming a writer, but it hasn't worked out and he's just stuck in this little shop and he sort of hates everything. He's very depressed and down. And then one day, this elderly woman comes into the shop and offers to help make the bean paste for the dorayakis. And this thing, like her coming into his life, changes everything for him. Now, they did make a movie adaptation of this one, which I have watched, and it was pretty close to how I imagined the story. So I am going to sneakily use some stuff from that. We're going to start with these cherry blossoms, though, because I feel like that's very much the vibe of the book, and we need, like, some dorayakis, some, like, street view stuff, I feel. And I feel like this book is very spring, but not too bright. I think I'm pretty happy with this. I could fiddle with this a lot, but I'm gonna try not to. But I feel like the vibe I'm trying to show is like gentle, spring, nostalgic, quiet, but also a little hopeful. And I feel like you get a pretty good idea of the characters from some of these photos. It really helps to have like the movie stills. I know I haven't mentioned the schoolgirl that's in the photo, but she's also part of the story, and there's also unlikely friendship in that, and it's a really beautiful book. I should maybe try to do these other ones a little bit more quickly though, because I spent way too much time on that and we're gonna be here all day if I spend as much time on all of the books I want to recommend. But let's move on to the second one, which is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, which maybe right off the bat doesn't seem like a book that makes sense for spring, but it makes sense to me because the book is about the main character starting a new thing in her life. It's like a new beginning, and there is something very springy about that, I feel. We're gonna start this mood board off with coffee beans because coffee is obviously a big part of this book. This is a fantasy book that follows this orc who is retiring from her days of adventure and mayhem, and on her travels she has discovered coffee, and she is settling down in this town where coffee isn't a thing, like nobody knows what it is, so she wants to bring it to the people, and she opens up this coffee shop, and obviously no one knows what it is, so there's like a little bit of struggle there. And the story is really about her finding herself in this coffee shop and having some people join her, and it's a story about friendship and just it is super cozy. She does come across a fair few challenges throughout this book, but mostly it's very cozy and light, and there is a lot of coffee in it. Now, I am gonna use the cover art for this because it encapsulates the book really well. And also, it is weirdly difficult to find like photos of orcs and like the other creatures in this that doesn't look like super weird. So I'm gonna use a little bit of that and then some other stuff. But mostly we're going for like cozy coffee vibes. I really felt while reading this book that it was very warm and inviting, and I could really picture this coffee shop. I got like a tavern vibe from it, like tavern slash cafe. And throughout the book, like they do expand a little bit and they like hire different people, and I am obsessed with the little ratkin baker that they hire. Like, his name is Thimble. He is the cutest thing ever. I would die for him. And I think about him all of the time. And every time I think about him, it makes me smile. He's also a really hard worker and he's so cute. So he deserves a special place in this mood board. And I feel like what I'm going with here is like cozy, rich, comforting, whimsical, fantastical. It is a fantasy book and it definitely feels like a fantasy book, but it's also just very, very cozy and also kind of funny. Like some of the quotes from this book are like pretty hilarious. Next, we have the book The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton, which is a real romp of a book. Like, it is so much fun. It's historical fiction and it's set in the Victorian era, and we follow this very proper Victorian young lady who is also a thief and a part of a crime sorority, which of course is just fine. Like, as long as you play by the rules and you don't rob people the wrong way, it's all good. The story sort of kicks off when someone sends an assassin, who happens to be a very dashing pirate, after the main character, and like off we go on this wild adventure with flying houses that basically are like pirate ships, and it's a lot of fun. Now, I couldn't find any photos of flying Victorian houses, weirdly enough, but I feel like we can still gather some stuff to get the right vibe. It is a little bit hard to sort of give off the idea of like how much action and how much swishing around there is in this. Like, and they're sailing around and we're sailing around slash flying around in their houses, and it's kind of wild. Like, sometimes even the houses land on top of other houses because they can't park them very well. Which is obviously very rude. I do feel like this painting I found, though, of like a classical, it's like classical art, but the woman is like, she has bubble gum. I feel like that's kind of the vibe, because even though it's historical fiction, it has a very modern like edge to it. Like, it obviously there are some fantasy elements and stuff, but it does feel quite modern. There is also a little bit of romance in this book, but like the vibe that I would like to show off is like playful and elegant and a little romantic, witty, kind of chaotic, but also very adventurous. Now we have another book in translation. It's also one of my favorites. It's The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yōko Ogawa. This is also set in Japan, and it follows this young housekeeper who is hired to take care of this old math professor who years ago suffered this traumatic brain injury, so he can only remember the last 80 minutes. Like, his short-term memory is only 80 minutes long, and he doesn't remember any, like, nothing sticks, basically. I feel like the vibes in this one is very much like books and math, but also like afternoon light and some vintage vibes, maybe. It is a quiet book in a lot of ways, and there's actually a fair bit of math in here, but you don't really need to understand it. It's written in a way where it's just beautiful, and I don't really know how the author did that, but it works. I also want to include this like baseball player and team into this thing because that's a part of the book. Like, the professor, that's one of the things that he remembers. He remembers the baseball team from when he had this injury. And I also want to have like some notes in here because the professor, he is aware kind of that he forgets things, so he keeps like making all of these notes of important things, and he like puts them on his suit, so he has all of these notes on him all of the time. And yeah, it's like, it is a pretty quiet book, I would say, so we have to get that kind of vibe. I feel like this makes sense to how I sort of thought of this book, at least. It's like tender and introspective. There's math, but it's also like mathematical beauty is a huge part of this book. And it's a little melancholic, but it has like a quiet warmth to it, which I don't really know how to explain. Next, we have a classic, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's Emma by Jane Austen, which follows the beautiful, slightly spoiled and vain, but also funny Emma, who gets involved in the lives of all of the people in her village, and she like plays matchmaker with devastating consequences, and there's so much drama in this book. This, of course, is also a book that has been adapted to film several times, which helps me. And also, it's set in the Regency era, and finding photos from that is not that difficult. For me, Emma, in my mind, has like a bright color palette, like greens and pinks and whites, and it definitely has like a romantic feel to it. I know not everyone loves the adaptation with this, with Anya Taylor-Joy, but that is very much the vibe that I feel this book was. So when I saw that movie, I was like, yes, this is the vibe. And I can't actually remember if this is set in spring, but I just associate it with spring because maybe because of the color palette. And yeah, it's like bright and elegant and romantic, playful a little bit, but also it has to have a little bit of drama to it. I also just have to include the still of this guy laying on the floor from the movie because I just thought it was really funny. It was like a funny scene. But yeah, I feel like this is how I picture Emma, at least. Like, this is very much the color palette and very much the vibe. I do feel like if you know Jane Austen at all, you can sort of picture the vibe yourself. Moving on, we have one of my favorite books from childhood. It's The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is one of the books that opened my mind to reading when I was a kid. I had a school librarian give this to me, and it blew my little mind. And I could really picture this garden. So making a mood board for this is easy peasy. The story is about this spoiled, ill-tempered, kind of horrible child named Mary, who is sent to live with her reclusive uncle in England after her parents die. And the story is about her finding happiness in a way because she's a very unhappy child, which kind of makes sense with her situation. And it's sort of about her and the people in this house, and most importantly, this secret garden that she finds one day. I feel like just the words secret garden will bring up some sort of image in most people's heads, unless you're one of those people who can't picture things, but I feel like when you see it, you'll know what I mean. There are also some movie adaptations of this as well, of course, and we just need a lot of green and a lot of flowers, and it needs to be sort of like overgrown and wild. This is a book that you could read for any season, but it feels very like spring and summery to me, and the vibe is like lush, a little mysterious, but also wholesome and sort of quietly magical, and it almost feels a little bit like a fairy tale, I feel, or at least in my head it looks a little bit like a fairy tale. Even though this is a book that is technically for children, I think you could read it at any age and it's still like a magical read, because who doesn't love reading about a secret garden? Back with the translated books, we then have one of my favorite books that I read last year. It's Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. And again, I feel like this fits for spring because it's about a main character changing her life in order to bloom again, in a way. That's a very flowery way of saying it, but you know what I mean. This one is also set in Tokyo, and it's set in this area where there are all of these secondhand bookshops, and our main character, who is in her mid-20s, goes to help out her uncle in her uncle's shop after she finds out that her boyfriend is marrying someone else, and she just needs to get away and she needs a place to rest. So she goes to this bookshop with her broken heart, and within this place, she finds a love of books she never knew she had, and she sort of heals. Now, if I remember correctly, this is set over several seasons, so you can read it whenever, but there's something about the quietness of this that I feel fits very well with spring. Now, I have a pretty clear mental image of what this place where this bookshop is located looks like, and I can't find something that fits that perfectly, but I still think we can get like similar vibe. This is the kind of book that I think is not for everyone. I know that a lot of people find this very boring because it's very quiet and it's one of those books where not a lot happens, but I really enjoyed it. The vibe is very like bookish and serene and quiet. it has this amazing like quality, like you feel like you really are like in this neighborhood in Tokyo, and it's very gentle. Then we have a book called The History of Bees by Maja Lunde, which I read in Norwegian because that's the original language. So in Norwegian it's called Bienes Historia, but it has been translated into English as well, and quite a lot of other languages actually. This is one of those books that has three timelines. One is set in 1852 in England and follows a biologist who is building a new kind of beehive. One is set in the US in 2007, and we're following a beekeeper who is sort of fighting against modern farming. And then we have one set in 2098 in China, and that one is set in a world where bees have gone extinct, and that is obviously very problematic. I feel like all these three perspectives have kind of different vibes, but they do have one thing in common, of course, which is bees. So let's try to find something that encapsulates that. Now, in addition to being a book that is very obviously about the climate, it is also a book about family and humanity's relationship with nature. I think this is a really interesting book, and it's a book that really makes you think, but you do also end up really caring about the characters. And like I said, we have kind of different vibes for each perspective, but like overall it's quite a haunting book in a lot of ways, and it has like an earthy, fragile vibe to it, and it really is all about like nature and the environment, but also about just people. Second to last, we have a book that feels like a spring summery type book for me, maybe because it's set in Greece for the most part, but it's Circe by Madeline Miller, and this is a Greek mythology retelling, and we're following, of course, Circe, who is banished to this deserted island by Zeus, and she spends her time there honing her craft, and throughout the years she crosses paths with a lot of famous figures in mythology, and the story is really about her trying to find her place in the world among gods and mortals. Miller is a beautiful writer. Like, that's the thing that really made me fall in love with this book. It is so lush and lyrical, and it has so much emotion to it, and we're following this very interesting character who is quite a complex person, but you really get to know her and you follow her for a long time, so it's hard not to get invested in her. I feel like the aesthetic of this shouldn't be too difficult to show. It's like kind of warm, a little dark, a little mythic, and we have a pig, which, if you know, you know. I feel like the atmosphere of this is like mythic, lyrical, which is difficult to sort of visualize, but that's the word that comes to mind. A little isolated and lonely, feminine, magical, but also really powerful, because not only is the story powerful, but the main character that we're following is also very powerful, and she lives quite the life. She goes through a lot in this book. Lastly, we are going to do a poetry collection. It's a poem for every spring day, which is obviously very specifically for spring, so it's kind of low-hanging fruit to recommend this, but here we are. This is a collection of poetry that has poems from all kinds of different people and authors, so there's something in here for everyone, and they are all, of course, about spring or related to spring and everything to do with that. It's also set up in a way where you can read a couple of poems every day throughout spring, and that's a really nice way to do it. I haven't read this back to back. I've only read like parts of this when I've felt like it, and you can read it like that too if you want to. All we really need for this one is a ton of different spring photos, and I feel like we're there. Flowers galore, that's what we need. And maybe some ducks, for no particular reason other than I like them, and maybe a little bit of like rain, because the weather in spring can be a little bit like all over the place. It's not just sunny, and I feel like the vibe is just very like fresh, blooming, light, reflective, again kind of lyrical, which again is hard to visualize, but like those are the words that come to mind. I feel like these kinds of collections are great for when you don't really know what kind of poetry you like, or you just want to discover some new poets or authors, or you just want to read a little bit of poetry. I feel like it's great to read in these kinds of collections. These are also made for each season, so there are 4 of them, so if you like one, there's another 3 that you can also check out. That was the last book that I had to recommend for you today though, which means we have reached the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this even though it was a little bit different. It was kind of different for me to film as well, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit messy. But yeah, I think I'll figure it out once I make more, and I really do want to make more because I have like a gazillion ideas for this, and I just think it's a cool way to show books. So I hope all of you like this as well. If you have any requests for specific aesthetics that you would like recommendations for, please let me know because I want to make more of these. And also, if you have any recommendations for books for spring, please share them. I feel like spring is the most difficult season to recommend books for. Like, all of the others are pretty simple, but for some reason spring is a little bit tricky. So if you have any recommendations, please share them. That was kind of it for today though. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!